Shimmering Skies has officially been released, and with that, 204 brand new cards. Last week, in this exact same video, we covered 7 brand new decks. Today, we're going to cover 7 brand new more decks. Lots to discuss, lots to talk. Let's get right on into it. Amethyst Steel has been a deck that honestly is underachieved in the Ursula's Return metagame. It really has not been successful at any of the Disney Lorcana challenges. Its numbers have been kind of abysmal, but it was a deck that was starting to really come to fruition at the end of the Into the Inklands metagame. So it's always a deck that we can kind of go back and look at and see what new toys have come out to make this deck a little bit better. In this particular set, we picked up Elsa, the Fifth Spirit, which is the 5-cost inkable, 2 strength, 5 willpower, 1 lore character with rush and evasive, and the ability to crystallize. When you play this character, exert chosen opposing character. With that, you're actually open up the ability to go a little bit deeper and play Elsa, Spirit of Winter as well. Having 2 ways to kind of tap down your opponent's board to really mess up their interactions goes a long way. Having the ability to play a card like Elsa while Robin Hood, Sheriff of Nottingham, is in play is a great way to get rid of characters and still gain lore, maintain board presence, and have a healthy willpower character still sitting around. A character like Pete, Games Referee, gives us the option to kind of time walk our opponents if we have a good feeling that they're looking for a good action turn. If you're looking to shut off opposing a whole new world, opposing Ashen and Song removal, obviously be prepared and things like that, then Games Referee is the perfect trump card to all of those strategies. I think the last new card that we picked up for this deck that makes it really truly powerful is the Library. The Library being a 3-cost inkable, 1 to move to 8 willpower location with 1 lore and the ability Lost in a Book. Whenever a character is banished while here, you may draw a card. This enables really fun interactions with cards like Chernobog's Followers. It makes our Captain Hooks really incredible. It makes basically every single card in our deck for 1 more resource have the ability to be a Cusco or a watered down rabbit, we could say. Every single card, when they leave play for 1 more, drawing a card really gives us the ability to have a healthy hand almost all the time and afford us the resources to be able to ink and move the game forward and be able to play our big characters like Elsa, Spirit of Winter. Of course, Queen's Castle is still a great way to win games and close them out. Having a 2 lore gain on a 7 willpower card that can also draw you additional cards really just kind of is the best way for this deck to close out games. All in all, I think Amethyst Steel has a lot of potential. I think the Library plus Chernobog's Followers, and honestly, even the Magic Broom really creates a way for you to draw so many cards moving forward that this is a list that will definitely get a lot of love early on as people try to figure out the best 60 cards for it. Ruby Sapphire is coming off the most recent Disney Lorcana Challenge victory. And if we're being completely honest, I don't think it got a lot to really go off of in Shimmering Skies. But the one card it certainly did want and did need was Cusco. Cusco, the Selfish Emperor, a 6-cost inkable, 3 strength, 5 willpower, 2 lore character with 2 abilities. The first being Outplacement. When you play this character, you may put chosen item or location into its player's inkwell face down and exert it, and its second ability by invite only, 4 resources. Your other characters gain resist 1 until the start of your next turn. Ruby Sapphire's biggest issue in the past was dealing with locations and, more importantly, opposing items. So this card effectively gave you a better option and a better chance in specific mirror matches. The other new card that gets added here that gives us a little bit more burst is Ruby Chromacon. Another inkable 1-cost playable item for this deck is wonderful. Anything that we can throw away easily with Hiram Flavorsham and get additional value out of it while it was in play is a definite win for any strategy in Ruby Sapphire. This deck still remains kind of the same. It doesn't really pick up anything crucial. It's not anything really new meta defining. It's really just It's really closer to just paving out the missing gaps and holes that was in the strategy to begin with, adding two more playable and inkable cards, might I add, because this deck could be very heavy on uninkables depending the version that you're running. This is obviously a modified version of the deck that won the most recent Disney Lorcana Challenge, and there are other versions of this that are more mid-rangey and less itemy, kind of all the same in the end. This is still a strategy that picked up these critical cards, which I believe we'll see play in virtually every version of Ruby Sapphire moving forward. Sapphire Amethyst is really one of the most hyped decks, I think, coming out of the Shimmering Skies spoiler season. Adding Merlin, Intellectual Visionary, was huge in this idea that now we have a 6-cost, uninkable, 3 strength, 7 willpower, 2 lore character with shift 5 and the ability of overdeveloped brain. When you play this character, if you use shift to play him, you may search your deck for any card, put that card in your hand, and then shuffle your deck. This ability in particular allows you to play a lot of very specific answers to specific decks in the metagame. Having the ability to play a one of for Anna or Ursula, having the ability to find your Isabella if necessary, your one of Mufasa if necessary, your one of Lucky Dime. All of these things are critical moments in games that allows Merlin to kind of be 4 of those versions in a way. Just the idea that when necessary, shifting Merlin very easily, might I add, in a deck like this. Shift 5 really is not at all difficult to get away with in a deck that has 11 Merlins. Yes, ideally, we do not want to shift on to a goat or a rabbit, and we much rather would shift on to a crab. But in a pinch, when we need to shift and go and find a specific answer, we have that ability to do so. The other new cards we're featuring here are Tipo, which is a wonderful addition to this deck, being a 2-cost, 1 strength, 2 willpower, 1 lore character that has the ability of Measure Me Again. When you play this character, you may put a card from your hand into your Inkwell face down and exert it. It's effectively a 1 jump ahead on 2 that's inkable and puts a character into play. I know that 1 jump ahead comes off the top of your deck, so you're not really stripping your own hand of anything. But in this case, putting a character in play that now has the ability to be Merlin crabbed as an effective way to kind of remove certain dangerous daisy ducks, I would say, could go a long way and catch opponents off guard. I still think that this is going to be one of the decks that will take a lot of effort to end up getting correct. A lot of times you end up early on in metagames trying to figure out what your opponents are doing. And by trying too hard to figure out the key pieces we need to find with Merlin, you may really want more information. So while I think this is a very good starter for it, and there are some new and interesting cards that you can see play here. As you can see, we also have the Floodborn Archimedes, which is another interesting one that goes a long way in trying to solve the daisy problem. If we can shift onto our own Archimedes, you now have that and Tipo as 2 different ways to kind of remove a daisy duck, which is definitely going to be a problem for this deck if you can't do either of those things. But the rest of the deck is where I wonder what ends up really being necessary and needed and how you end up winning games. I think that this deck will definitely be one that develops more and more over the metagame, and hopefully we can finally see Sapphire Amethyst be a mainstay within the Disney Lorcana metagame. With Shimmering Skies, there have been a lot of new developments on a lot of new decks that have really hit the ground running. With that, there might be 14 decks here. You might be seeing this video. It could be a week after this video has been posted, and some of these decks might have changed drastically. As we start getting towards a Shimmering Skies metagame and we get past DLC Toronto, that is where we're really going to start hitting the ground running and start going forward for Disney Lorcana Challenge Vegas. With all of that, we have a Discord for our Patreon members where we're really constantly talking through decks, talking through developments, getting them prepared for DLCs, getting them prepared for things like set championships and things like that. We have an entire forum for all of these decks that we talk through, and we kind of walk through all those changes. So if you're looking to up your game, you're looking to become a part of our more competitive community, you should definitely check out our Patreon. It's a great way to support us It's a great way to kind of like help us continue to provide the best information as possible as well. And really just a nice way for you to thank us in general. Even if you don't want to join one of the higher tiers, you can always just join one of the smaller tiers as a thank you and support for all the work that we do here. Regardless of anything, this is a great place to be. It's a great community to be a part of. And it's still very much a growing community as we all really start preparing for these larger tournaments coming up, like Continentals, like Worlds that were just announced, and so many other things like that. Ruby Steel, Shimmering Skies, Knights. This is definitely one that I don't know that I would say is like a tier 1 deck by any means, but it's very much a living embodiment of what Ruby Steel could look like in a metagame. This is probably on a tier 2 end and probably needs more work than any, but this deck really does have a lot of interesting play lines and definitely will be a way to catch opponents off guard. Seven Dwarves, Mine, and Radigan's Party are both very interesting ways to interact with this deck. Having additional ways to gain lore through your locations is great. It's a kind of a way to approach the game, much like how Amber Steel does. Now, granted, this deck does not have a whole new world. There could be an argument that it should have a whole new world, but the Seven Dwarves Mine in a deck with this many knights has the ability to really keep the board clear, allow your characters to stay on board longer, remove things over and over again, and keep your hand healthy all the while just by utilizing the move location instead of consistently slamming to the board. Fire the Cannons plus moving a knight to Seven Dwarves Mine is 3 resources to do 4 damage to a character. Like, it does sound pretty pricey, but in the end, there aren't that many ways to pay 3 resources and do 4 damage to a character. That's actually very difficult to do in the game, and this is allowing you to do that through multiple cards, and one of which that gets stuck in play and gains you lore the entirety of the game. What this deck also offers is the Captain Hook, Forceful Duelist, and Ruby Chromacon ability to have a turn 2 answer that lives and survives against a Daisy Duck. That's very hard to find in the format, and this deck does represent one of the ways to do it if you're willing to mulligan strong enough. It also enables Fire the Cannons plus Captain Hook. Captain Hook in general is one of the better answers to Daisy Duck if you can find a way to finish it off through a plethora of ways that Steel has to offer that. Snow White, Fair-Hearted, looks like a character that probably falls short more often than not, but in a deck that does enable this many knight characters, really can become a problematic card to deal with. Outside of Medusa, giving resist 2 to this Snow White means it survives a lot of different ways to interact with it. Even just one knight in play when you play it means that, and then along came Zeus, can't remove it. So it does seem like a cute card. It might fall short and not be good enough, but it does feel like a great payoff for this deck. Cinderella Stouthearted is not a card that I have ever really been in love with, but the 5/5 3 lore 2 resist does happen to be a knight and play into the strategy very well. So therefore, we're going to give it a shot again and see how good this card can really be. The fallback draw here is, of course, Beast Mirror and Doc Bold Knight are both ways that once you're out of cards, this can be the last card that you play, draw 2 cards. Beast Mirror, once you're out of cards, gives you the ability to draw some cards. Obviously, the Captain Hook, Captain of the Jolly Roger, has the ability to effectively bring back a Fire the Cannons. So there's a little bit more synergy there as well. The uninkable count is quite low here at 13, which is a great number for this deck. So it's not that difficult to get these cards out of your hand when necessary. All in all, I think Ruby Steel is in an interesting state right now. I think this has constantly been a deck that's been really difficult to play. But if you're really looking to embody a new core in the deck, which is Knights, then I think this is a great way to try it out and, try and make it work. There are definitely other options that you could go with the Knight strategy, but I do feel that cards like Radigan's Party and Seven Dwarves, along with Ruby Chromacon, are great additions to what the Knights are trying to be doing on average. And then, of course, Tuk Tuk is a wonderful card that I love bunch as well, and has the ability to interact really well with all these locations as well. So there's just a lot going on here that provides definitely a strategy that we haven't seen before or almost ever truly come out in Disney Lorcana in the Ruby Steel ink combination. So even that might be enticing to certain players to say, hey, maybe it's like a league night and I just want to have a little bit fun, play something a little different and see how it goes. And you never know what you can find when you start playing decks like that. Amber, Sapphire, Ducks. That's right. This is a Huey, Dewey, and Louie deck. Now, listen, I can imagine, right? I can imagine some people are looking at this and they're like, there's just no way that this deck is good. This deck is viable. These cards are not good enough. And I want to stop you before you go too over the limit here. What I can tell you is that in set 4, our teammate Colby actually top 4 to set championships with an Amber, Sapphire, Huey, Dewey list. So before you get all out of whack and you go, there's just no way, I assure you that this deck has game. This deck is an actual choice that has already proven itself to be able to win or top 4 a set championships. It gained a little bit of more interesting cards before this deck was playing like Dragon Gem, which was bringing back support cards, which was kind of helping you, assemble the Exodia of the Huey, Dewey, Louie line. But now we just have Revive that brings a card back immediately. We have a card like Wreck-It Ralph that actually brings back princesses and gains you additional lore when doing so. So it actually got a little bit more interesting, and adding a card like Prince Naveen, so you can actually instantly how far I go to kind of accelerate yourself, or play a card like Let It Go, or even World's Greatest Criminal Mind. This deck has a lot of synergy around support. It does a lot of things that I think that you shouldn't immediately overlook and just write off when you see this deck at first glance. So you can see here the deck and name of the game is the idea that we have 4 Let It Go and 4 World's Greatest Criminal Mind as our key ways of removal, along with 4 Minnie Mouse Musketeer Champion, which is World's Greatest Criminal Mind on a stick. The deck has a plethora of draw power, specifically anytime that we can get Huey's ability off, which is the 3 Nephews ability. Whenever this character requests, if you have characters named Dewey and Louie in play, you get to draw 3 cards. So this deck really does have this innate ability to draw so many cards and keep its hand so healthy to consistently flood the board and remove things along the while. You might go, oh, well, how does this deck answer cards like Rapunzel's Tower and the library? Well, you have support, and a lot of it. A lot of these characters, when they quest, you get to buff up your other characters and start swinging into opposing locations like that. Not to mention the queen here is also a way to minus and buff things as well, and really giving your cards the required strength to remove locations. The one fault here in this particular list is there are no answers to items. So that could be a bit of a fault, and we could maybe make that better, change the deck up a little bit. But in the end, I think a card like Rapunzel's Tower is really phenomenal for a deck like this. Having this ability to have a 2-cost inkable 8 willpower location with 1 to move to give any of your characters +3 willpower will really keep all of your characters around much longer. It'll make Rapunzel much better. It'll give longevity to your support questers even more. So it really is kind of worth taking a turn off early potentially, or when necessary, like when your character is in danger, to just play this card and then add however much willpower you need necessary to the characters that you want, and really make it difficult for your opponent to answer all of your threats. Revive is a perfect addition to this deck, having so much utility and so much ability to kind of like really blow out the game by bringing back a plethora of really good and powerful cards is helpful. And even a card like Wreck-It Ralph is only a one of. I could see him being more, in all honesty, as a way to gain lore outside of this. Getting back Ariel, getting back Rapunzel is just like a really great line, because you get to get back a card you want anyway, gain 2 lore, and then each of those cards have the ability to find you more cards. And you get a 6 strength, 7 willpower, 2 lore body in play as well, which doesn't hurt. We're definitely playing around with the song package a little bit, trying out some new cards like Bare Necessities and 4 Dozen Eggs, which is another card that I don't think has really seen much love in its day. But, the 4 cost song that's your characters gain resist 2 until the start of your next turn. Something like that you can play for free with Naveen when you play him can really protect the board and kind of just be like another way to keep your characters in play against steel decks by turning off a grab your swords or something like that. Not to mention, this deck does like to quest and buff characters. So in any way that we can play Naveen, play 4 Dozen Eggs, quest with our fill to give something +3 strength, and then that character run into a card and still live to tell the tale and remain a really healthy board state will go a long way, I think, in making this deck even more annoying to play against. Like I said, I know you look at it and you're like, I don't think it's good enough. Maybe it's not. And hey, maybe it is too cute. Maybe the ducks are not good enough. Maybe you can just replace the ducks and play 12 more naturally playable characters. But if you're looking to have a little fun, I promise you that every time you play a duck, your opponent will pick up a card. It'll be like this. Like they'll pick up the card and they'll be like, "What is this? What does this do?" And they would read it all the time because no one's played these cards before. So the synergy is there. The combo is there. Greatest Criminal Mind, Minnie Mouse removes so many cards. David coming in, letting you let it go right away. Like there's a lot of really fun interaction with this deck, and I think it's one of the more overthought in combinations in the game. And this might be a nice little way to like just show up and just start kind of like wrecking house in a local tournament that you're like, my opponent just don't know what I'm doing. So looking for something new, I think this is a really fun, cool way to do it. And it definitely got a little bit better with cards like Revive and Wreck-It Ralph and Prince Naveen, obviously, because that card's bonkers. So give it a try. Under the Sea has really probably finished under the radar for many in the current Bucky format. I do believe the card has a lot more playability now that Bucky is gone, and now that you have the ability to like actually set up lines and keep cards in your hand, and set up a real play around the Under the Sea. So I think that this card does get better moving forward. But what I love about this deck in general is that I think this deck is a true Clarabelle deck. So Clarabelle, Light on Her Hooves, is a 7-cost inkable, 5 strength, 6 willpower, 2 lore with shift 5 and the ability keep in step. At the end of your turn, if chosen opponent has more cards in their hand than you may draw cards until you have the same number. So what exactly does that do? Well, if we have the ability to play cards like Mother's Knows Best and You're Welcome, then we're going to consistently keep our opponent's hand up. But it also works with the muses as well. So all of these green effective bounce and draw card spells all work really in synergy with Clarabelle. Because now, if I muse something back to my opponent's hand, it's fine because at the end of the turn, I get to draw a card with Clarabelle. If I Mother's Knows Best it's great. If You're Welcome and they draw 2 cards, it's fine because at the end of the turn, I'm also going to draw 2 cards. I think this deck has a lot of very interesting strategies, and it plays into this emerald green removal package really well. And then obviously utilizing a card like Remember Who You Are, which is Clarabelle on an action as well, just gives a lot of different ways to kind of move the game forward, keep your board presence, and keep cards like Belle, Strange But Not Special, very protected. Obviously, Gigantic Crab, very protective. And just having this way to keep the board constantly clear and all the drawback that you get from some of these cards turned into a positive because of Clarabelle. Mother Gothel, Unweaving Schemer is another great addition to this. When you play this character, each opponent chooses one of their characters and returns it to their hand. So this deck is really just looking to keep their opponent off the board the entire game and then just win through draw power of utilizing the fact that your opponent has a high card count. Tamatoa and Belle, Strange But Not Special, being the closer for the game with Lucky Dime is just kind of a match made in heaven. Having Under the Sea plus Ice Block also creates very interesting combinations and ways to remove cards from play. I think that this deck really has the chance to be a brand new core and in combination within Disney Lorcana. it's one that I've been waiting to be able to try out more. There was a version of this that we had very early on in Ursula's return, but it just couldn't really be successful. I think now, with the removal of Bucky from the game and the format in general, this deck is a lot closer to having the potential that we need it to be to feel comfortable playing it in a tournament. Ironically, Ruby Emerald is our last deck on this list, but there are 0 cards from Shimmering Skies in this deck list. It's truly just a Diablo Ursula deck that has Ruby removal that is utilizing Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo to kind of just like circulate these infinite loops of ways to keep your opponent off the board. So you can see here with cards like Lady Tremaine and Lady Tremaine, we have the ability to consistently get back our Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo and do one of two things with it. Either we can consistently keep putting Lady Tremaine back into play and removing our character's opponent from play through banishing them with Tremaine, or we can actually Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo and sing We Don't Talk About Bruno over and over again and do the same. This deck just has the ability to completely lock your opponent's characters out of the game and be really annoying all the while doing it. I don't know how good this deck is if you cannot get a Diablo to stick. The deck simply does not have enough draw power without him. So any opponent understanding that and going out of their way to make sure that you can't just draw 2 or 3 or 4 cards with Diablo is probably the key factor to why this deck will inevitably fail. But I felt like it was interesting enough to showcase. And when I realized that we built the entire deck and didn't have any Shimmering Skies, it felt a little bad. But the truth is that this deck can't exist previous to this now anyway. It's really reluctant on a specific type of metagame in order for it to even exist. The one thing that you could possibly fit in here is Ruby Chromacon. I think that card's too good to not be playing. So if I were really looking to get a Shimmering Skies card in there, it would likely be Ruby Chromacon. So there we have it. 7 more decks from Shimmering Skies to start with in this brand new metagame. I think there is so much potential. I keep saying this. I really feel like Shimmering Skies has the ability to be just as diverse of a metagame as Into the Inklands felt. We'll have to see if there is enough answers, enough ways to really interact with Daisy Duck. I think she might be the one harbor of the metagame that might prevent this, because there just might be not enough decks that interact with her well, and then therefore they just become like not good enough because of it, or they have to be able to prey on the opposing decks well enough to be kind of like a rock, paper, scissors-esque thing. We'll have to see what time kind of prevents that or enables it. We'll have to see. It's really tough to say. But I'd love to know if you play with Shimmering Skies yet. Hit me up in the comments and let me know about it. Let me know what you're playing. Let me know what you're successful. Let me know if there's any Shimmering Skies cards that you have been really impressed by. I honestly think that the set is very good, very powerful, has so much potential. And yes, we have a short amount of time right now where Toronto is kind of really the focus for competitive play for all the players going to Toronto. But Vegas is really not far after that. We're about a month, maybe 5 weeks from Vegas now. So we're definitely going to start looking towards it, start building towards it, and really seeing how these decks develop over that. But in the last 2 videos, if you haven't watched that one, make sure you watch this one. That's 7 more decks right here. You have 14 different ways to start in Disney Lorcana. And honestly, more than just that, because some of the decks I showcase could probably be 30 cards different and be like the same ink combo, but it's still a different deck. So all in all, thanks for watching today. If you haven't yet, smash that like button. If you enjoy videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe. And of course, make sure you check out this one in case you missed it. I'll see you next time.